GrayMatter leaders, to our unpublished podcast for GrayMatter Leadership Coaching. I'm so delighted that you've chosen to tune in again and to invest some of your time today to engage with us in yet another conversation that's intended to move you into the leading edge of your life and business as a leader. At GrayMatter, we believe you've got the power to activate the part of your brain scientifically known as the gray matter, and in so doing, you can take yourself out of autopilot thinking and behavior. Now, in case you're wondering, my name is Jeanette, and I'm the head of sales and communication here at GMC, and also your host for today's leadership conversation. I'm joined by my co-host and our founder, BJ Gray. And today, I know we're talking about something that I've actually been looking forward to quite a bit: anti-fragility. And that is something I need to understand. So I'm going to bring BJ out right now so she can tell us exactly what she means when she says we need to learn to be more anti-fragile in today's world, because even though it's becoming more volatile, more uncertain, we have things being thrown at us, it's super important that we learn how to deal with today's complex world. So, BJ, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you, Jeanette.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to let you jump in, and I'm going to start with one simple question. What does it mean to be anti-fragile?
All right. Well, I appreciate that we're talking about this subject. As you said, today in the current environment, so many of us are experiencing a lot of uncertainty, whether it be in the workplace or in our personal life. And I found that I needed to talk more about being anti-fragile as a useful concept for all of us to embrace, maybe be part of our own characteristic as we move forward in just how we conduct ourselves in the workplace and in life. And the reason why it's a useful concept is because we're very sensitive right now to all the changes that are happening. We're very sensitive to how our boss is relating to us, how our company's relating to us. We're sensitive if we don't have a job right now. We're sensitive to our kids maybe being home all the time, maybe even doing work, school from home. And we need to learn how to become less sensitive. So obviously, anti-fragile is the opposite of fragile.
Yes.
And how do we get more control over this state where we feel so fragile? And this is what anti-fragile will do. And I want to let people know the ways to do this and how to develop being anti-fragile. So this is going to make them feel more in control day to day when they're feeling like they don't have control over the uncertainty. Does that make sense?
Totally. And it's really spot on, especially when you're in charge of either a household or a company or a business or whatever, even just being in charge of yourself. I do think we've become so sensitive, and it's rather hard to feel like we have like our feet on solid ground, if that makes sense. So
Totally.
You're saying you want to give us something that at least, even if the ground is shifting, we can somehow still feel like we have some stability.
Yeah, and you're not going to be so sensitive to the ground shifting.
Beautiful. Okay, so maybe give us an example of being anti-fragile.
Well, I think a great example is, I'm going to relate it back to sports, of course, is Bill Belichick. He is the head coach of the New England Patriots. It's an NFL football team. And to me, he is a perfect example of anti-fragile, because if you notice, he's completely in control of what's going on, even when he's on the sidelines. Like, let's just say the team makes a mistake. He doesn't really get angry or show frustration or get thrown off by these mistakes. He kind of just stays really focused. And he also, on the other hand, when the team makes a touchdown, he doesn't necessarily get overly excited. He stays in control of those reactions. And I'm not saying that being anti-fragile is to not have emotion. I think we should have our emotions, and we should learn how to process those emotions and live with those emotions. but there's a way to take that experience, whether it be a mistake or maybe the team is, potentially not going to win the game. There's uncertainty about the outcome of the game, and still be really anti-fragile in that moment, right? So that you can stay productive, so that you can stay in control and not really react to the situation in a way that won't serve you. And so Bill Belichick to me is like the perfect example of anti-fragility, because he stays in check all the time. And I believe he's adopted this what I call stoic mindset to keep him in that space. He's really, really good about being stoic in how he, the only thing he can control, I guess, in those situations is how he reacts to the situation. And I think that makes him a good leader, makes him a good coach, and it makes his team super successful because they have one of the best winning programs out of all the NFL teams. And it's because he stays anti-fragile in the moment when there's uncertainty, whether they make a mistake, whether they're winning the game and just got a touchdown, he stays super in control of his reactions.
That makes so much sense. And, as you're saying that, I'm thinking this is essentially what you're saying is, I also love the fact that you never actually prime me on these things. And I'm kind of like the student learning right as we're doing this. But what I'm getting from you is learning to be anti-fragile is very much connected to learning to shift from being in a state of reactivity and just being at the mercy of the stresses or whatever is happening in the moment, to almost like creating my neutral zone from where I operate, where I'm, I'm not at the mercy of the changes that are happening moment by moment. Like, is that kind of
Totally
where you're going?
Yeah, you're not getting hijacked by your emotions, right? Instead, you're
Yes.
staying neutral. You're staying in control of your reaction. I mean, here's another good example, a sports analogy. Again, Serena Williams a few years ago in the US Open in New York City, she was in the finals, right? And she got hijacked by her emotions, and that caused her to lose the match. And the reason why she did is because she received some sort of penalty from the umpire, from the ref, and she immediately took that to a personal place, like he was attacking her character with this penalty. And she, instead of staying in control of her reaction, she completely reacted. And as she kept reacting to her emotions, she dug herself bigger into a hole, and the ref kept giving her more penalties. And before you knew it, her head was so far gone. She didn't have this stoic mindset. She was so far gone that she completely crumbled and lost the match. And so she got hijacked by her emotions. And so I'm sure post this big, tournament, she had to go and get some coaching on how to deal with her mindset in the moment, which is what I do with leaders. I teach them how to work with their mindset in the moment of very difficult situations in the workplace, of very difficult conversations they might be experiencing. And there's two ways you can react, right? You can get hijacked by your emotions and completely react in a very unproductive way, or you can stay in control, like Bill Belichick, in a neutral space and maybe react in a way that's going to be a little bit more measured and curious, so that you can be productive, so that you can win in that moment.
So it's really a question of, in any given situation, am I going to be Bill Belichick, or am I going to pull a Serena Williams? And that
Totally.
essentially determines the outcome, whether I'm dealing with my kids or with my boss or with my clients. It doesn't matter.
Totally. And don't get me wrong, Serena Williams is a pro, and she's definitely
she's
held her
awesome.
mind in check, and she's won a lot of tournaments. So we're not perfect. I guess the example is, in any moment, all of us could falter, even if you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this so beautiful, because we both love her so much. I mean, so much. But it's great to see, even for me, one of the things that I learned about that is how much I really need to continue working on myself, because there is no such thing as, I've reached the ultimate. It's
Never.
always, there will always be more progress to be made, more ways for me to understand my brain, my mind, my behavior, and I can always keep improving on that. And if I slack even a little bit, I'm falling right back into where I don't want to be. So I
Right. But
think
if you
that's
have
kind
the
of
tools, you can pull yourself out faster. And that's what I want to teach everybody, is to have
faster.
these tools. I mean, I was just like, I'm a work in progress all the time. And back in my
Yeah.
corporate days, I actually, reached for learning about stoicism and being anti-fragile, because I had my own moment where I got hijacked by emotions with a very
Mm-hmm.
senior leader. And after me reacting to this leader, I actually called HR on myself and told them what I did. Like, I knew what I did wasn't right, and that
Yeah.
I wanted to almost get myself in trouble, to like give myself my own wake up call to go
Yeah.
learn how to have a better mindset for myself. And I think this was the springboard for me, getting into my own self-development and my own growth in this area. And this is why I think it's like the most important tool for so many of us to embrace, so that we can be the best leader and the best example for our own employees when things
Yeah.
get difficult. And listen, things are always going to be uncertain and difficult. Things are always going to be changing. That is just how life is. And so how do we become less sensitive to all those whiplashes that we're experiencing?
You said that, at least you said this to me, that being anti-fragile actually increases my ability to experience all my emotions instead of, you know, making some of them wrong or hiding them or denying them or suppressing them. Can you talk more about what you meant by that?
Yeah, it being anti-fragile increases your capability of feeling all of life's emotions, because you're prepared for the negative emotions, because you're prepared for these times when it's not a really wonderful workspace, or you're thriving, right? You're not going to be
Mm-hmm.
knocked off your game because you feel an uncomfortable emotion. You feel angry, you feel scared, you fear that someone might be attacking your ego in the workplace. You're going to be actually prepared for that moment, because you now know that moment's coming. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll have the tools to process those feelings, when you adopt this stoic mindset in that moment, so that you can react in a way that's more measured. Yeah, I think it increases your capability for all these negative emotions.
I love it. So I took that in to mean that, in essence, by becoming anti-fragile, I'm actually learning to set the right expectations for me when I'm working,
Totally.
because I'm not just looking for the pleasure emotions, but I'm also aware that it's a 50-50 thing. So on the one hand, I'm going to feel pleasure, but on the other hand, there's going to be some things that don't feel so good. And because of that, I'm aware and prepared and I have the tools, it doesn't freak me out as much,
Totally. It's
right?
about
So,
accepting that life
mhm,
is 50-50, and it's accepting
yeah.
that it's like, um, I mean, it's like a step-by-step process where, in this moment where you're feeling some sort of failure or negative emotion, it's like
Hmm.
who you are in that moment is more important than what's happening. And Arnold
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger, he was giving, I don't know if I pronounced his last name right, but he was giving a commencement speech to a bunch of graduates from college recently. And he was talking just about stoicism, referring to being anti-fragile. And he was saying to these students, the most important thing you do in your life is go forward with this notion that it's not what's happening, but who you
Hmm.
are in that moment that matters more than what's happening. And the key is to learning how to manage your mind better, to strip away the
Hmm.
immediate drama that you're experiencing in times of crisis or uncertainty or change. And that, that whole idea of mindset strategy ties right into what I teach in my leadership coaching with thought management. So I was like so excited that someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger brought this up to
Yeah.
future generations in terms of how they
Yeah.
move forward in their career and their life, is to accept this concept of stoicism, because we're all overachievers, and we're all going to, as an overachiever, you're going to experience a lot more negative situations, because you're trying and you're failing, and you're trying and you're failing, because you're constantly overachieving. And if you don't adopt this characteristic or concept, you will never get out of this state of being in drama, or being fragile, or being too sensitive to the situation. It's hard because young graduates, young adults in the workplace aren't taught this in school. They're not taught this
Yeah.
way of like managing their mind in these very difficult situations.
Yeah, so true. Okay, I'm totally sold. So please tell me, how do I start applying this concept into my life? How do we do that?
Well, I'm just going to give you a quick cheat sheet, and then we can follow up with our listeners in another deeper conversation about it. But really what it's about
Perfect.
is, it's about, to develop a stoic mindset so you can be anti-fragile, is tapping into the part of your brain where you have control over your mode of thought. And I call this the gray matter, of course. The gray
Of
matter part
course.
of your brain is the most powerful part of your brain. That's where decisions are made and your behaviors are created. And so I want to give you guys 7 tips for having a stoic mindset. And the first tip is, 1, what I just talked about, which is prepare yourself for the negative moments. And 2, process those immediate emotions that you're feeling so that you don't get whipped up in drama. And 3, the biggest thing I can say is try to notice the thought that is causing you to react. You may not be able to do it right there in that moment, but if you can reflect after you leave that moment, it's really important that you nail down the thought that was causing you to react. And then the 4th thing is, I like to start to ask questions, is what is the opposite of what you're thinking? Like, try to challenge your own thinking and figure out what the opposite is of what you're thinking. And then where would you be if you weren't thinking that thought? Like, really try to put yourself in a simulated experience of the opposite of your thinking, or where you would be if you weren't thinking that thought. And then I like to go into a strategy of this mindset, which is, how do you want to react? So right then in that moment, you don't want to get hijacked by your emotions. You have a way that you really do want to be mature and you want to react. So clarify that intention in that moment. How do you want to react? And then what I like to say in situations of uncertainty or change is, you can't control everything going on. So what can you control? Which you can control yourself and how you react, of course, but ignore the things that don't matter. Start letting go of the stuff that you can't really control. And then turn things from this conversation in your head is, well, I have to do it this way, to I get to do it this way. So you start changing this behavior by thinking about it differently. You're not thinking about you have to act this way, but you get to act this way. It's a slight shift, but it really changes the dynamic of how you start to behave when you feel like you're going from having to do something to I get to do it this way. When you say I get to do it, you have control over what you get to do. And then my last piece of advice is, whatever the setback might be, whatever the difficult conversation you might be having, just keep going forward. Don't get wrapped up in the drama of it. Just keep moving forward. And these 7 tips will help you move forward.
Oh my goodness. I'm totally thrilled. I'm thinking to myself, we need to make a whole webinar, a whole class around this.
Yeah.
So good. I loved it. They are very practical. We can apply them immediately. And for everyone who is listening to this, if you are not in our email list, please get on it, because we're going to be, sending out amazing content just as follow-up after this. I know there's so much more you can get into with being anti-fragile. I'm sold on this.
Yeah. And if you
I
guys want
think,
to read, I want to put one more thing out there. If you want to read a
oh
book
yeah,
about it,
yes.
Ryan Holiday writes a really good book called The Obstacle is the Way, about the philosophy of Stoicism and being anti-fragile. So if you really want to grab a book and get better at this, I would recommend The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
The obstacle is the way.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. BJ, this was amazing. I think everyone who's listening to this, unless there's just something fundamentally wrong with them, they want to be anti-fragile from now on.
Yes.
They want to activate their gray matter.
Yes.
This is
Perfect.
so much fun. I know we have to stay on the clock with this because you have to run, but I really want us to continue with our unpublished episodes. So we are doing this again, aren't we?
Yes, we will be. Definitely next week. Let's get on another call.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for you who tuned in and gave us your time, we're so grateful. Please go and get that book that BJ just mentioned. And by all means, get on our list if you're not there yet, because I'm sure BJ is going to be diving deeper into this conversation and you don't want to miss that. Until our next conversation, have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.